Hi, I'm Andrew with Odd Harmonics, and in this video, I'll show you the preferences in Nexus. Preferences are a great way to customize Nexus to fit your needs. There are a lot of them, so let's dive right in. In the Preferences tab, the first section is Macro Defaults. Its first preference is the default audio folder for new actions. If an action has a parameter for where an audio file is stored, this will be the folder that is selected by default. The second preference is the default duration of audio fades. For example, if you leave a Fade and Stop Audio Player action's fade time parameter blank, this is the time it will use. The next section is List Items. This section controls the behavior when making new items, such as macros and triggers. The top preference is for what happens when you click the New button, and the bottom preference is for what happens when you click the Paste button. There are the same four options for each. When the item is created, Nexus can make it at the top of the list, before the item you currently have selected, after the item you currently have selected, or at the very bottom of the list. As with all the preferences, there are no right or wrong answers. Whatever is most intuitive for you is what you should set this to. Personally, I set both to After Selected Item. The next section is Reboot Recovery. This section describes how Nexus will behave after a core reboot. These settings also apply when switching over from an active core to a standby redundant core. The first preference is about recently missed actions. Nexus keeps track of which actions it's supposed to do when, so when it starts up, Nexus will realize if it just barely missed executing an action because of the reboot. This preference tells Nexus how far back in time to look for any of those missed actions, and immediately executes them. For example, if it's set to 30 seconds, missed actions from the last 30 seconds will be immediately executed, and missed actions older than 30 seconds will be ignored. If this is set to 0, no missed actions will be executed. The second preference is whether to recover any upcoming actions in the action queue. These are actions that were added to the queue before the reboot, but had a long delay time, so they hadn't been executed yet. The next section is Logging. The first three preferences describe what kinds of messages to log in the various places. The Status Alert is the big status you'll find in the Status tab, as well as the bottom right of other Nexus tabs. The Core Event Log is the log that's in Core Manager, which is accessible by clicking on the blue core name in the top left of Q-SYS. The Nexus Log is the log that's shown in the Nexus Status tab. For these preferences, there are 5 levels of severity. 5 means Nexus will make a note for every bit of minutia. It's only needed when troubleshooting. On the other end of the spectrum, 1 refers to errors if something big has gone wrong and Nexus doesn't know how to handle the situation. 0 means log nothing. Check out the user guide for full details of each severity level. For each location, Nexus will create log entries for messages at that level, as well as those that are more severe. I recommend leaving them at the default settings, unless that's giving you an issue. The last preference in this section is how many recent entries will be kept in the Nexus log. The next section of preferences is for the QList transport. The first preference is the Go's double tap prevent time. This is how long the Go button will be disabled after triggering a queue. This setting is useful to prevent accidentally triggering 2 queues, one right after the other. The next preference is the Auto Advance for the Go button. If enabled, pressing the Go button will trigger the queue, and then automatically select the next queue in the queue list. If disabled, the user will have to manually press the next button to select the next queue. The next preference is the press and hold time for the stop button. This is how long the user must press and hold the stop button in order for the stop to be triggered. The last preference is what will happen when the stop button is triggered. The options are stop all named audio players, clear the action queue, or both. If those settings aren't quite what you want, and you need to have custom functionality for a stop button, you can make an instant trigger button and build a macro specifically for it. The next section of preferences are the master enables. There is one for each type of trigger. For each of these master enables, if it is disabled, no trigger of that type will execute. Note, these masters are separate from the enables for each individual trigger, and they do not control each other. In order for a trigger to work, both its individual enable and the master enable must both be enabled. The last section is network triggers. These preferences set which network ports Nexus will listen on for incoming TCP and UDP messages. A couple notes about these. By port, this does not mean the physical connectors on the back of your core. These ports refer to the virtual input numbers on the network connections themselves. The other thing is that while one Nexus can listen on the same port for both TCP and UDP, different instances of Nexus require different ports from each other. This is a limitation of Q-SYS and helps make sure that network messages are sent to the intended destination. Alright, that's it for this tutorial. Check out the next video in this series to learn about how licensing works in Nexus. For more information about Nexus, or to buy a pro license, go to odd-harmonics.com. And if you have any questions, please email us at support@odd-harmonics.com. Thanks for watching.